Thank you for joining us here at Tax, the platform where we try to demystify the sometimes confusing world of international tax. And today we have the honor and the privilege of two very distinguished guests to help us understand international tax with Brazil. And that's Pilar and Rodrigo. Would you guys like to introduce yourself? Ladies first, Pilar.
Oh, hello, everyone. Really nice to be here. I'm a Brazilian tax advisor. I'm also an academic, and I've been working at HHP, that's a Dutch law firm with international cases. I think that's the main thing.
Fantastic. And Rodrigo.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rodrigo. Thanks, Darren, for the invitation to be here. I'm a tax lawyer in Brazil. I'm a tax partner at Mota Fernandes. We are a law firm based in Rio, São Paulo, and Brasilia, the capital of Brazil. I'm also a tax professor here in Brazil. I teach tax law at the court here in Rio de Janeiro. We have a law school at the court, so I teach tax law for those who want to be judges here in Brazil. So basically, I have this experience acting as a tax lawyer and also as a tax professor here.
Fantastic. If someone wanted to move abroad, they wanted to move to Miami, they want to move to Portugal, London, or wherever, what steps do they normally need to take to sever tax residence with Brazil?
Yes. It's something that I understand is very important, and I have to confess that a lot of people don't do that, but it's a great problem because basically what you have to do, if you are living in Brazil and at the moment you are living in Brazil, you have the intention to move your life outside Brazil, you need to communicate that to the Brazilian tax authorities. At the moment you're living, you can communicate. It's a very simple communication. You do it through the internet. And then the next year you will file your tax return, basically as your last tax return as a tax payer in Brazil. So two different events. First event, you communicate you are living. Second event, you file your last tax return. But why am I saying last? Because you can return. Okay, yeah. But you file, and that moment is in a way that you close your relation with the Brazilian tax authorities here in Brazil. It's very important to do that. It's very important. Why is very important? Because we return to my first point. We don't tax our nationals. We tax our tax residents. So when you do that, you formalize and you put a day at the end of your relation with the tax authorities in Brazil, and it will work in your favor. Because if you move to the US and you win the lottery in the US, you don't have to pay taxes in Brazil if you are no longer a tax resident in Brazil. And those procedures will work in your favor. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't do that, forget to do that. And what happens when you don't do that? The Brazilian legislation say when you stay out of Brazil with the intention to move your life of Brazil for more than 12 months, you automatically lose your residence in Brazil. But you don't have the proof. It's not a matter that you don't have, but it's difficult to prove sometimes. I had a case in the past that was a very interesting case. It was a kid that left Brazil to study in the US, to study 6 months. I don't know if it was some just summer school was done, and decided to stay and went to the MIT and graduation in MIT and create a company in the US. He started to win a lot of money in the US, but he had never communicated to the Brazilian tax authority he left Brazil. And one day he returned to Brazil and tried to buy a home in Brazil and everything that. And the Brazilian tax authorities started to ask, what happened to your life? How you have money to buy this house? And at least he needed to prove that 10 years ago, 12 years ago, he left Brazil. In this case, he had not the intention to move his life at the moment he did that. But at the moment that he decided to stay in the US, he needed to inform that to the Brazilian tax authority. It's something that works in your benefit. So it's very important. And one thing that is very important, if one day you decide to return to Brazil, and one day you decide to move your life back to Brazil, it's very important because this gap in your economic life is, how can I say, protected from the taxation in Brazil. But you need to prove that. You need to prove the day you left. You need to prove you were returning. In Brazil, is something that is different from other countries, because in Brazil, when we do our tax returns, we inform our revenue, but we also inform all of our assets, real estates, banking accounts, money. We inform everything. So it's very important to the Brazilian tax authorities to understand what happened in your life. So that's
you're listing,
the procedure.
You're listing all your assets in Brazil as well as outside of Brazil together.
Yes. If you are a taxpayer in Brazil, you have to list your assets in Brazil, and you have to list your assets outside of Brazil. You have to list everything. The idea of, just to clarify one point, why the Brazilian tax authorities ask to know your assets, because knowing your assets is a way to understand if your revenue is current with your assets. Right. How you maintain those assets if you are declaring, informing so low income in those years. That's the one of the purpose of knowing your assets. So basically, we have a very, very well-regulated, my point of view, well-regulated procedure to leave Brazil and to come back to Brazil. And sometimes, unfortunately, a lot of times, unfortunately, people doesn't know that, they are not well instructed about that, and it could create a lot of problems that you can avoid.
Is there an exit tax? Pilar, do you want to comment on that? Is there an exit
tax?
No,
it's not an exit tax.
Okay.
It's not the same.
No, okay.
But can be similar. Let me explain.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
When you leave Brazil, you are going to pay your final, as Rodrigo said, tax return. And then they are going to calculate your capital gains, your income, your labor, the income tax over your labor, and etc. It applies the same rule you would pay if you were a resident, because you are still a resident. That's why it's not an exit tax, because not because you are leaving. You pay the same amount of tax you would pay if you are still a resident. The difference in this moment is that you are saying, okay, bye-bye, I'm leaving the country. That's my last moment here. So you pay until the moment you are leaving the country. So it's in the moment you exit the country, but it's not exit tax. The logic is different when you have exit tax.
So there's there's no deemed distributions and no deemed sales, nothing at all. So it's regular tax, but it's just on the last day. Okay.
Yes, exactly. I'd like to add some information to Rodrigo. So I fully agree with him. But in my practice, I've seen some people that decided to not inform the tax authorities they were leaving.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. They had lots of investments in Brazil. And you have different rules about investments if you are a resident or a non-resident. And they decided, that's the reason they decided, that as Brazilian interests in investments are really high compared with European ones, American ones, they decided to keep the investments. And when you inform the tax authorities you are leaving, you are supposed to also inform the institutions where you have investments. And then you had to change the type of investments you have. And sometimes they just think, okay, it's worth the risk of keep the investment and possibly having the issues about the taxation. People usually do that when the country they are living has a tax treaty with Brazil, because they can solve the problem about taxation with the tax treaty that will define where they are tax residents, because you have the national, the domestic rule, but you also have the tax treaty, so we're going to solve this problem. It's a little bit unorthodox, right? It's the right way of doing that is exactly as Rodrigo said. And I'm not telling people to do that. I'm just telling everyone here that some people do that, because investing in Brazil, especially compared with, I can say about Europe, the interest is like 10% to 12% a year. So,
Okay.
So if you're a 6, 7, or 8-figure investor, entrepreneur, or business owner who needs a tailor-made solution from a qualified team of professionals, we can help you achieve the international lifestyle, the freedom, and even the tax savings you're looking for. Visit us at htj.tax and live that international life.